Joining me now is Jason Sobel of SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio to talk about Tiger Woods' return this week. Hey, Jason, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Carolyn. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm good. You know, it's fascinating with Tiger. He's nearing 50. He still moves the needle like nobody else. And this Genesis Invitational that he's taking part in, the first time we've seen him in quite a while on a major stage like this. What do you expect from him this week?
I don't expect a whole lot, but that doesn't mean that this is not a week where we're going to watch Tiger and be interested and intrigued what he's going to do. He has not played a non-major championship tournament since November of 2021. It was the Zozo Championship that year. He played 3 majors last year. Of course, we saw him play an unofficial exhibition event alongside Rory McIlroy and another one with his son Charlie at the PNC Championship. But this is his first non-major start in 16 months. And so I look at this as a positive, Carolyn. Of course, he's the host of this event, but he's looking towards the major championships. And so just the fact that he's getting in, he loves this word, reps. He's getting in the reps before major championship season gets here. Hopefully he feels healthy. He plays okay. He can maybe make even another start before the Masters in April. And I think that's all good things moving forward. But as far as his game this week, I wouldn't go overboard and think, hey, maybe Tiger can win. Finally, he's never won at Riviera. I would pump the brakes a little bit on that.
Riviera is a course that he's struggled on over the course of his career. Why do you think it's given him such trouble?
It's a great question. I don't know. It should be a perfect golf course for Tiger Woods. The one thing that we say about the best players in the world is that they can win any place, anytime. I've always thought that's what separates the best of the best from the next tier of players. Tiger in his prime was the best of the best of the best. I mean, he was the greatest of all time. And yet this is the one tournament that he just couldn't figure out. He couldn't figure out Riviera. Now he's played well, 14 career starts at this event, 11 made cuts, 4 top 10s, 2 runner-up finishes. One of those runner-up finishes, by the way, it wasn't at Riviera. It was at Valencia Country Club, which hosted back in 1998, 25 years ago. He lost in a playoff to Billy Mayfair. The only time he's ever lost a playoff on the PGA Tour. He's 11-1 career in playoffs, and yet he can't get over the hump and win this golf tournament. I know it's been eating at him for the last quarter century. He's won so many times. But if you ask Tiger, like, hey, do you have any regrets in your PGA Tour career? My guess is not winning what they used to call the LA Open, probably near the top of the list.
It's interesting to hear you say that. And I have a feeling he never forgets, right? I'm sure he's got that list of coulda, shoulda, woulda right at the ready. Yeah. And he still is such a huge draw just because he is who he is. I mean, does that ever cease to amaze you that even in a week where people shouldn't expect too much, if they're being realistic, he's still probably going to get more eyeballs than everybody else?
No, Tiger's always been story 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D for as long as he's been playing. And quite frankly, now that he plays with less frequency, the chances that we have, the opportunities that we have to watch him, we can't take them for granted, and we have to, at least admire and pay attention to how Tiger Woods is going about his business. And again, a lot of this it's less about this week itself and more about, the swing looks pretty good. He's walking without a limp. Maybe, Augusta coming up in a few months. I mean, it's all about what could be as opposed to the present. But I will point out, Carolyn, that unlike maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and I work on the gambling side of golf these days too, covering it from a couple of different angles, excuse me. And unlike years ago when it was just Tiger, 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 and he was the only story, I think now the public tends to look at the other players a little bit more, and not just the Jon Rahms and Scotty Schefflers and Rory McIlroys either, but I think people have more of a personal investment in what's taking place. And so if Tiger plays 2 days this week or plays 4 days this week, either way, he's not the only story. And it wasn't always like that. There were plenty of times when it was Tiger or nothing. And now I think the PGA Tour is in a nice spot where people are paying attention to the other top players as well, and not just Tiger.
I do want to unpack that a little bit further because the PGA Tour is seemingly in an interesting time. And Live Golf obviously has been well documented and having a lot to do with that. But I would argue that the the golf fan base has almost reluctantly been forced to look around at everybody else, because whether we like it or not, time catches up with everybody. And, you just can't expect that magic from Woods trying to get those reps in, as he put it. Before we move on to sort of the state of the PGA Tour and where it stands with some of these other significant storylines, the Masters, in your mind, is that probably the best chance for Tiger to make a little bit of noise at a major? And do you think that that is where his focus is, that tournament in particular?
I would say, at least for now, yes, that's where his focus is. That's where his focus, quite honestly, always is. Whether he's, playing this week and getting some reps and thinking ahead to April, he might be hitting balls in his backyard in October, and he's probably thinking about the Masters. That's usually it, foremost in his thinking. And so, yeah, that is probably his best chance of winning another one, at least for the major championships. I would throw the Open Championship at Royal Liverpool this year, where he's won before. I would throw that in the mix as well. So again, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. I get it. It's only been 4 years since Tiger Woods last won a major championship. I've learned over the years, never, ever, ever write him off. As I wrote this week, he could be 78 years old and barely be able to swing anymore. And I'd say, well, you never know. He still might have a chance of winning this week. I will say, though, that, look, he's been through a near fatal car accident, almost lost his leg a couple of years ago. Just the fact that he's playing, I think we can enjoy it and we can take it for what it is right now. And if he happens to play some really good golf, even better. That's just gravy.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the physical cues that people might be looking for, fans of the sport. Oh, the swing is there. He's not moving quite as gingerly maybe as he has since the accident. I mean, are there specific things that you're going to be watching for, Jason, in this warm-up round with these reps that might indicate one way or another what may or may not be possible?
Yeah, so a few things I'm looking for. I'm looking for, health-wise, just walking without a limp, looking like he's not stretching out all the time. It's going to be cool, especially when he plays a morning round in Los Angeles this week. I know a lot of people, if they're not in California right now, they're thinking, oh, it's going to be beautiful out there. It'll be hot and sunny. It's going to be cool in the mornings. He's playing his Pro-Am round on Wednesday at 6:35. I think he tees off in the morning. It's going to be 38 degrees when he tees off. And so if he's able to get limber, to stretch out and look like he's not dealing with health issues, I think that's a very big sign. As far as the golf, I'm looking less at where the ball is going and more at things like swing speed, more at his touch around the greens. If he has that, then I know he can move going forward and keep improving on it. But if the swing speed is down, which I don't expect, if he has no touch around the greens, if he's chunking chip shots or something like that, that is cause for concern. But again, we saw him in December. We saw him play the PNC Championship. Everything looked pretty good. There's no reason to think that a few months later it won't look even better.
To your point, the waste management this past weekend always sort of entertains and delights us, and it was electric and exciting, and the focus was on some of these other golfers and Scottie Scheffler. When you look around the sport on the tour, what other storylines are intriguing you most right now?
Right now, the biggest and most intriguing storyline other than Tiger, and I would say this probably supersedes Tiger right now, is the fact that we have three great players who I think are going to keep rotating back and forth in and out of that number one spot for the official World Golf Ranking. Scottie Scheffler, as you mentioned, just won the WM Phoenix Open. I was out there this past week. He played terrific on the weekend, back-to-back wins at that event. He's now played over the last 53 weeks, because remember, that event was his first win on the PGA Tour last year. So over the last 53 weeks, 5 victories on the PGA Tour, and victories in different spots against good fields, including a Masters championship. Scottie Scheffler has been terrific. Leapfrogs both Rory McIlroy and Jon Rahm for number one in the world. Like I said, these are three absolutely fantastic players. They're going to keep bouncing back and forth with that number one ranking, I think, throughout the entire year, which, again, I think that's a really good thing for the fans to be able to look at it and say, hey, I don't know who the best player on a week-to-week basis is. This is so much different than we had 15, 20 years ago when we had one dominant player and then there was everybody else. Now we have all these really, really good players. It's a different time in golf than it was before, but that doesn't make it any worse. In fact, for true fans of the game, you can certainly look at it from a viewpoint of this is way more fun to watch than one player who wins nearly all the time.
So you would argue that parity is better for the overall health of the sport, even if the TV ratings might not indicate that with a huge star like a Tiger Woods.
It's very interesting, Carolyn. We've gone back and forth on this for years. I think that parity is better for the diehard golf fan, for the person who's going to watch every event, no matter what. They're into it. They're betting on it. They're paying attention to it. I think that if you have 10, 15, 20 top players in the game, all of whom can win on any given week, I think that's good for the health of the game. I think that's good for the people that are watching on a regular basis. But don't get me wrong, having 20 players like that does not eclipse the public interest from the casual fan that Tiger Woods had in his heyday, because I just don't know that you're ever going to get there. One thing that I've heard many times and completely agree with is that, look, we understand in golf, this is a niche sport. This is not the NFL. This is not the NBA. This is not Major League Baseball. Golf has always been a niche sport. What happened during Tiger's prime years is that Tiger made it a mainstream sport just because the masses flocked to watch him play and watch him dominate and win golf tournaments. What we have now is sort of a regression back to what's essentially a niche sport. And maybe that's not necessarily giving golf and the PGA Tour enough credit, because obviously there are millions of fans out there, but to expect that it's going to get the same interest and ratings as when Tiger was dominating and every single your grandmother would be watching on a Sunday afternoon. Your neighbors who didn't watch golf would be asking you about Tiger Woods. That's not going to happen when a Scotty Scheffler is winning a golf tournament. It's just, you're not going to recreate that. But again, for the diehard golf fan, for the people that are watching every single week anyway, this might be you could at least make the argument that this is a more palatable product.
It's fascinating insight, Jason, and it's something that I didn't consider. And now we have this new metric to determine value in wagering, which you mentioned that have expertise in. So common reason would say that those who are wagering on golf, which is, as you described, something of a niche sport, would be the diehard fans who would want the parity. I'm not sure that, your grandmother couch surfing on a Sunday who loves Tiger Woods is going to go to a FanDuel or a DraftKings or something to try to bet on the game. And so from that standpoint, having parity and having this young group of sports fans that likes to actively get involved, I imagine is a good thing, because do the numbers translate from a betting standpoint?
The numbers translate, certainly. Golf is growing like literally on a weekly basis. Golf is growing in the betting marketplace. People are understanding that, unlike a football game where, hey, I'm going to sweat over my bets for 3 hours, then it's over and I see if I win or lose. Golf starts on Thursday morning. It ends on Sunday evening. And so for more than half the entire week, you are watching your bets, you're paying attention, you're adding more bets. And so there's so many different bets that you can make on a weekly basis, so many different investments that you can have, that I think people are starting to understand how much fun it is, from that standpoint. And then there's the fact that anytime people have a personal investment, Carolyn, and I've seen this for a long time, that all of a sudden it goes from Tiger, 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 or Rory, 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 I just want to watch the best players, to, hey, I want to go watch KH Lee because I have him for a top 20 this week. People see that their personal investments translate into not only wanting to watch different players and wanting to understand how they play and wanting more knowledge about them, but I think it gets into becoming better fans, becoming smarter fans. The PGA Tour has certainly seen this as well. The PGA Tour now has 5 official betting operators. They have partnerships all over the place. They're building a sports book at TPC Scottsdale, where we just were last week. And so the PGA Tour's own investment in their product from a betting perspective shows that they understand, because quite frankly, I've been covering PGA Tour for 20 years now. And back in the day, it was Tiger Woods. Then it was about 3 or 4 other players. And then anyone beyond that, basically, other than your diehard fans, people just didn't seem to have much interest, didn't care that much about the non-superstars. That's completely changed. We talk all the time now about, who's your favorite mid-tier pick, who's your favorite long shot pick, and people eat up that information because they have that personal investment, and the personal investment leads to more engagement from the public.
Yeah, I don't think that point can be overstated enough, just because it's such a departure from what we've seemingly seen for decades, where you had Arnie and Jack, and then you had Greg Norman and Tiger. You had these singular personalities that sort of defined the game for so many years. And now this younger generation is coming in. They're interested in wagering. They're savvy to it. And it's kind of changed the value of some of these guys that might have been forgotten about, which is really interesting to me. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how the PGA Tour has responded to everything that's happened with Live Golf. I mean, when this story first broke, I was fascinated by it, because it seemed like the PGA Tour was put in a really interesting and in many ways a difficult position, where they were being forced to accelerate growth and creativity in a way that maybe they hadn't been challenged into before. Gambling's a huge part of that. They've also done some other stuff to kind of get a little bit creative, and so many of their players have remained true to the integrity of the tour. How do you think they've managed all of this?
So it's a great question. It's also a layered question, because there's not one singular answer. I will say that the PGA Tour was very slow to react at first. I think the PGA Tour, quite honestly, from the top on down, was arrogant in the fact that they didn't think another tour could step in and just offer money to players and pull them away. I think the PGA Tour thought, we've been around for decades. Nobody's going to leave our tour and go play somewhere else. And quite frankly, they got burned by that arrogance, and Live Golf stole away a lot of really not only very talented players, but polarizing players. And I think there's more polarizing players, quite frankly, Carolyn, on the Live Golf Tour right now than the PGA Tour. The PGA Tour is sort of all the nice guys. The Live Golf Tour now has, whether it's Patrick Reed, Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka, Bubba Watson, all of these players, Phil Mickelson, you either love them or you hate them, and you have some sort of passion. I've always thought golf is so much better when fans have passion for whatever player they're watching on TV. And quite frankly, I think a lot of that passion now is gone with some of these players leaving, because you watch and you look at a Colin Morikawa, you look at a Justin Thomas, a Patrick Cantlay, and for the most part, I think fans look at him and go, yeah, he seems like a nice guy, I'll root for him. But there's no like, hey, I really want, you watch a football game and it's, I really like this team, I want them to win. I really hate that team, I want them to lose. And there's passion. And that's why the NFL is so big amongst the masses. But we don't have that same passion, I think, on the PGA Tour right now. All of that said, I've painted a very negative picture there of the PGA Tour's reaction to Live. But what's happened over the last 6 to 8 months, though, has been very positive in the fact that Live Golf has forced the PGA Tour's hand to have what they're now calling designated events. There's going to be, I believe, 17 designated events every single year where players have to, the top players, compete in these events. And so we saw it last week at the WM Phoenix Open. We'll see it again this week at the Genesis Invitational, where all of the game's best players are playing. That's something that we didn't have for years, because we might have 5 of the top 10 players play one week, and the next week, 5 of the top 10 players, but a completely different 5 than the previous week. So now we're getting more events with the best of the best going against each other. That will create sort of a schedule that's got haves and have-nots, but at least we get these events where all of the game's great players are playing. I think it's a positive for the PGA Tour, certainly a positive for the players. They're making a whole lot more money that the PGA Tour, quite frankly, had to offer to them to keep them from all going to Live Golf instead. And so there's been a lot of positives out of what was initially a very negative situation for the PGA Tour.
Yeah, that's a really sort of concise breakdown for a topic that I realize is super layered to throw at you. Yeah. Are you surprised that Live Golf has, well, I guess let me back up. At Live Golf, in your mind, with all the stars that you mentioned that left, and how polarizing some of those guys are and how fun they are to watch, it was like you separated the purists from the people that wanted something different, something more, just like straight down the line. There were some who were so loyal to the tour, and then others who couldn't wait to kind of watch what was going to happen on the Live side. Is Live sustainable in your opinion? I mean, is this the new normal with designated events on the PGA Tour side to try to satiate some of the players' needs for a little bit more cash and switch it up a little bit, and then having this other option?
It's certainly sustainable. Look, if they want to keep throwing money at their own product, they're going to keep throwing money at it. And essentially, I think what we have to understand now is that over the past year, we now have two different major golf tours. And, there's not going to be, at least for the time being, and for I would think a while now, there's not going to be any sort of intermingling other than the major championships. There's not going to be a PGA Tour versus Live Tour, Ryder Cup, or anything like that, for as much as people would like to see it. Essentially, what we have is two different factions going about their business in completely different ways, even though they're both hosting golf tournaments. It's interesting because, Carolyn, what I've seen from Live is that for as much as people are talking about it, for as much as this has been a massive story outside of just golf, but in the mainstream sports headlines over the past year, that Live is taking away players and Live is hosting events, the actual interest in Live golf events is very, very minimal. If you ask somebody, hey, who won in Chicago last year? Who won in Boston? Who won in Thailand? Who won at Doral? I don't think even the most diehard, quote unquote, Live fan who, has defected along with some of their favorite players could give you those answers. So there's interest in the league itself. There's not as much interest in the product, though. There's not as much interest in the tournaments that they're hosting, which is a very, very strange dynamic to me. And at some point, the novelty wears off, and what you're left with is, okay, we play golf tournaments 14 times a year, and we have 48 players, and some of them are pretty good, some of them aren't great, and that's just what it is. And so I've said this a number of times, but I see the PGA Tour as competition, and I see Live Golf as entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they're two completely different factions of the same sport, which is, it's very, very interesting to me, sort of the dichotomy between the two.
Yeah, which is why it kind of led me to my question about sustainability, because I agree with you. And the only way to make that product sustainable is to keep throwing money at it. So I guess if the well never dries up and it doesn't matter that it's not really growing or trending with a fan base that cares, that's one thing. But it's just such a fascinating thing to kind of think about. And just really quickly before we move on, and then I'll ask you a couple more and I'll let you get out of here. The idea of sort of torching this rivalry, setting a fire under it, and maybe creating a competitive atmosphere that has the Live Golf guys and the PGA Tour guys, the two sort of tours going head to head. You can't envision a scenario covering the PGA Tour as long as you have where the tour would indulge something like that as a sort of marquee event or even a one-off because of how badly they were burned by this whole process.
Not right now. Now, I can't see into the crystal ball. I mean, a year ago, we didn't even think this was a possibility, any of this. And so this whole story has moved so quickly. As I said throughout most of it, I said, anyone who thinks they know what's going to happen long-term with the future of all of this is kidding themselves, because it was changing like literally every 5 minutes from PGA Tour and Live Golf's perspective. So as of right now, no, the PGA Tour is not going to indulge Live Golf and say, hey, you guys want to work together and let's do something. Quite frankly, I don't even understand what and I've heard this from so many fans over the last few months, but why don't they just sit down and have a meeting and work together? I don't understand what the work together is. That's like, that's like saying McDonald's and Burger King should get together and you can have a Big Mac and a Whopper at the same place. It doesn't really work that way. They're two different businesses. And so they're holding both golf tournaments, but they're completely different otherwise. Now, when we look to a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, would the PGA Tour have thoughts of entertaining, hey, let's have an event where you guys and our guys play against each other, and maybe we make it a team format and it's like a Ryder Cup, and everybody's happy and we try to have one great champion for the whole thing. I could certainly see that at some point in the future. I think there are too many bruised egos right now on either side of this that it would happen right now. But yeah, in the future, certainly anything is possible. And look, money talks. And if some sponsor wants to jump in there and say, hey, we'll put up $50 million for the PGA Tour and Live Golf to go against each other, I don't think either of those tours are going to look at that and say, no, thank you. They're both going to jump in and say, hey, we got the money, let's do it. And so I would think it comes down to the sponsorship dollars because certainly the interest from the fan perspective is there.
Would warrant some consideration at the very least. Okay, last question from me. Because you are a gambling guy, I'm curious, bring it back around to Tiger Woods at the Genesis Invitational. How do you handicap this field? What do you see playing out?
Yeah, so for Tiger himself, I spoke with Jeff Sherman, who's VP of Risk at Superbook Sports, who had odds on Tiger as soon as he announced that he was playing on Friday morning last week. He started 100-1. He has since drifted to 150-1. Look, I will not be having a Tiger bet outright this week. He has also moved to minus 300 to miss the cut this week. I think that's, look, I'm not betting anything minus 300, but I think he has a better chance of missing the cut than making the cut, which is reflected in those odds. And then his over-under for the first round, 73.5 is a total score. I figured he would be starting with a morning round and then playing in the afternoon on Friday. And that morning, like I said, going to be colder, chilly, maybe he doesn't warm up quite as much as or as well as he would like to. Apparently, I've been told by the PGA Tour, I have sources that tell me he's actually going to play in the afternoon on Thursday, which at least gives him a little bit better of a chance. He's playing with a couple of his buddies on the PGA Tour. From what I hear, it should be Rory McIlroy and Justin Thomas alongside with him, so that should help. Maybe that 73.5 number is a little too high, but I'm still not betting on Tiger. That said, for the rest of the event, I'm looking at ball strikers, players like Jordan Spieth, who had a really nice finish in Phoenix, finished in 6th place. I think he's going to have a nice week. Adam Scott has 7 top 10 finishes in 14 career starts at this event. Really good course for him. But Carolyn, I go to some research that I did this past week. So I mentioned before, Scottie Scheffler, Jon Rahm, Rory McIlroy, the 3 best players on the PGA Tour, the top 3 in the world right now. They keep going back and forth. Really hard to differentiate between the 3 of them. What I found, though, is that when they have a week off beforehand, Scottie Scheffler and Jon Rahm have each won 5 times since the beginning of last year. They have no wins when playing the second week of a back-to-back. Rory McIlroy, on the other hand, his best play comes on the second week of a back-to-back. It's almost as if maybe Scheffler and Rahm prepare a little bit better on a week off, and yet Rory needs to get those competitive juices flowing, and then once he gets into the feeling of competition again, plays better the next week. He's got a much higher top 10 percentage, win percentage, and higher average finish when he's playing the second week of a back-to-back. So of the 3 of those, I'm looking at Rory McIlroy at 10-1. I know it sounds a little bit chalky with these designated events, though. What we've seen so far is these are the domain of the big boys, and we have not seen anyone jump up and win as a long shot yet. I don't think it happens this week either.
This is the kind of fact checking, the kind of research that I'm into. And I imagine those who are diehard about the game are also into. Tell us where everybody can find you on a more regular basis, because I'm primed to put down a little bit of cash on Rory McIlroy right now.
Let's go, Carolyn. So you can find all my written work and podcasts at actionnetwork.com and the Action Network app. Plus, as you mentioned, I do a radio show with my friend Michael Collins from ESPN on SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday afternoon, 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time.
Fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate it.